Alright, let's get straight to business here, because this is going to be a long one, and I'm going to assume y'all know what you're in for by clicking on this. First and foremost, obviously spoilers for the entirety of The Watcher. Again, you already knew that. As well as how a ranking video like this works, how needlessly thorough you could expect me to be, yada yada. Look, there's a whopping 30 new regions in The Watcher, more than the base game and Downpour combined, and almost all of them give me something interesting to say. And that's not including all the, stupid decisions I'm making that bring us up to a grand total of 44 regions and subregions to rank. And as per usual, I have no real criteria other than how much I like the region. Could be based on aesthetics, could be based on how cool the lore is, could be based on just how much fun it is to explore, though the latter tends to outweigh everything else when it comes down to it. The Watcher is a great DLC if you're like me and just love exploring new frontiers. What I appreciate the most about the Watcher's regions is how weird they get. All sorts of environments that simply could not have worked within the scope of Five Pebbles facility. One of the most exhausting parts of Downpour was how stale some of the new regions could get. Yep, that's another ruined factory. Oh boy, another iterator superstructure. I love most of those regions, but they'd rung the bell dry for what they could do in that space. It was time to move on. And thus comes the Watcher, where there's a degree of surrealism that makes every new warp exciting, because you never know what you're gonna. Oh damn it, it's Aether Ridge again. I kid. Maybe. On top of how freaky the Watcher regions look, most of them tend to have a gimmick that they really focus on, and because they're so focused, most of them do their one thing really damn well as a result. And again, I love that. Though I will say that, at least to some extent, the way the Watcher's campaign is structured does de-emphasize the individual regions a bit. Not only do they trend a lot smaller on average, but you're not really meant to stay in a region for too long like you would in either base game or Downpour regions. There's no karma gates locking you in for dying too much, which for my money is a great change, but it does mean the Watcher is different in some fundamental ways that make it hard for any of the regions to ever feel like home, the same way, say, an outskirts or an industrial complex would. On the flip side, because Rainworld has been out for so long and so many wonderful level designers contributed to this expansion's mishmash of regions, the baseline quality of regions is way higher than ever. There's almost no outright misses or even regions that I don't enjoy to at least some extent, even if there aren't as many regions that stick with me the same way as the best base game and Downpour regions do. Also, yeah, the Watcher isn't all original regions. It's got a mixture of pre-existing regions made by modders alongside a pretty solid number of new regions made specifically for the Watcher. So on one hand, it's a little awkward to compare the works of different developers in this way, but on the other hand, I mean, hey, Downpour was almost entirely the work of modders too, and I had no problem comparing those regions to the base game ones. They're all official content now, so I'm just gonna treat them all as if they're on the same playing field. And one final caveat, the Watcher campaign is far more dynamic than any other campaign, and the state of regions can change in a big way over the course of the campaign, as well as the tools you have on hand to deal with every region's creatures and environmental hazards. I'm gonna do my best to try and focus on the most vanilla versions of every region to the best of my ability. No rot-infected variants, no hiding in ripple space to explore with ease, and minimizing the impact of the Watcher's incredibly overpowered floatability when considering exploration and platforming. Except in instances where you're expected to have it, of course. Okay, that's enough rambling. Let's get to the part y'all came here for. Every Rainworld Watcher region ranked from worst to best. And when I say every region, I mean every region, including... Okay, aside from how incredibly funny I personally find it to put Farmer Race at the bottom of another region ranking, it's not down this low because of any problems I had with the original region or any new problems the Watcher introduces. No, it's here because it's literally 9 rooms! And that's being generous. 2 of them are the gate and the shelter. Farmer Race only exists in the Watcher for the sake of its echolocation, scree, and it serves its purpose fine enough, but like, it's literally nothing. It's not F tier because it sucks, it's because F is for Farmer Race, and I'm thusly putting Farmer Race in the Farmer Race tier, as it should be. And while we're on the subject of base game regions that technically exist in the Watcher, yeah, let's just get these out of the way real quick. Yeah, no surprise here, but honestly, these really shouldn't even count. More than any other region in the Watcher, these rotted base game regions exist less to be explored and more to be cool and shocking. In fact, exploring them is an absolute nightmare between the outrageous creature spawns, the rotted food that makes getting your pips harder, the obviously high density of rod patches, and the weird gunk that slows your movement down. I honestly find that last one the most egregious. Oh, and the fact that one of the two ways you end up here, going through too many portals in a row, is going to leave you in a weakened, low stamina state similar to starving and without invisibility powers, so, good luck staying alive in some of the harshest environments Randall has ever had to offer. You're probably better off just dying on purpose at that point. And like, yeah, they are really cool, I won't deny that, though I kinda had to be told they exist because I never once stumbled upon one naturally. Hey, the game warned me there'd be consequences, so I listened to it. So it was a bit less cool than discovering them for myself, but there's still some appeal in seeing a completely ruined, rat-infested version of an area you've come to know and love over the course of, again, 300 plus hours of raw rain worlding. Though, I question drainage system, decaying tunnels being one of those pools because it doesn't really hit the same. No less because it's also handily the smallest of all the rotted regions, but it also just feels the most pointless. I'm the freak for loving drainage system. The average player loathes it, so that sense of familiar place turned hostile doesn't really exist. Feels like we should have gotten a rotted, emptied out shoreline instead. That's the main reason why it's below crumbling fridges, i.e. outskirts, and corrupted factories, i.e. industrial complex. Outskirts is the most basic version of rotted region possible, so yeah, sure. And industrial complex is interesting because it's actually two entirely separate areas. And the larger main area has a whole 2 exit portals, so it ends up being a lot easier to escape from than the others. Though eagle-eyed viewers, or well, anyone who's even remotely familiar with the Watcher, will have noticed that one of these regions is missing, and we'll get to it pretty soon. Don't you worry, I haven't completely lost my mind yet, but I have my reasons is all I'll say for now. But okay, now let's get to the actual worst region in the game, which is, oh god damn it, it's just Aether Ridge again. Well, not really, but also kind of. Actually, let's talk Aether Ridge as a whole for a bit, and I mean all of Aether Ridge, because look, I'm gonna be blunt, the Watcher really did this region dirty. Like, all of it. All 6 regions in the Watcher that are pieces of Aether Ridge ripped out of the original mod and sectioned off to be their own things, with minimal changes and additions to account for that. And because they're all cut from the same cloth, they all share some similar aesthetics, and because there's so many of them, it can get a little exhausting to see yet another piece of Aether Ridge for, and this is not a joke, I counted, the 13th time. Yes, 13 of the 44 regions and subregions I'm ranking here are all Aether Ridge, and that's not even counting the region that's a future variant of one of them. So 14, technically, a third of the list, which leads to a lot of them, but especially mainland Aether Ridge having this negative emotional aura to it, to steal a phrase from Super Mario 64. No less because Aether Ridge, the region, is massive, easily the biggest region in the Watcher, and for the way this campaign is meant to be played, I can only see that as a bad thing. I avoided the region like the plague once I'd gotten all the footage I needed for this video, and can you really blame me? And on top of all that, Aether Ridge also gets to join the exterior in regions made exclusively out of subregions. Yippee! I don't know why this in particular annoys me, but it just does. Anyways, Ridgeworks is the worst of the whole lot by virtue of being the most pointless, the blandest. There's really nothing special about Ridgeworks. It's a maze of dark blue rooms that all look the same, all of them filled with messy, awkward architecture that makes moving through them feel especially like a chore, which would be fine if there also weren't so many blued-in lizards and so many platforming gauntlets over death pits. And it's, again, too goddamn big. The sameness part of all the loops and one-way paths makes me feel like I'm going insane. It is the back rooms of Rain World, dark blue in every direction and no exit in sight. I guess there's nothing truly awful about it, but it's just so devoid of good qualities, and it straight up repulses me more than pretty much every other region in the game, even the ones I rank below it. I'd say it's the worst part of Aether Ridge by a long shot, but, well, it's not really by that much, unfortunately. The surface is kinda tragic because, like, I should love this region, right? Saint is my favorite Rain World campaign to this day. The Watcher has comfortably taken a silver medal after the 1.5 update. Here's the updated tier list if you really care, but, like, I love me a nice snowy environment. Cannot get enough of harsh winter vibes. Strong winds signaling an oncoming blizzard, man. But the surface isn't really that. At the very least, I've never spent enough time in a cycle to see the winds and storms really intensify to the levels they can get to in Saints campaign, and I've never once frozen to death here either. Plus, Saints campaign was kind of riding out the emotional weight of seeing regions you've come to know and love having been so changed by the passage of time, which, the surface is just that, but for Aether Ridge. I barely know Aether Ridge, man, and I don't really like what I do know about it. It just doesn't hit the same. The surface's main region in particular gets the short end of the stick amongst the three areas because while Tundrafall gets the more interesting creature spawns and room layouts, and Fallen Tramway gets some spooky platforming sections, the surface gets Wormgrass. Yup, it's the obligatory for some reason Wormgrass region of the Watcher. Like, it's fairly inoffensive Wormgrass. There's really only 1 or 2 rooms where it's even remotely a threat, but like, that's really all you have to offer me? Touching grass? It, again, just feels kind of bland. And while it's a lot more streamlined and the rooms are a lot better designed than Ridgeworks, it is still kind of just cold Aether Ridge, with the negative emotional aura that comes along with it. I don't know, I can't really even justify my dislike for this one more than that, but I just do not like it. It disappointed me a lot more than Ridgeworks. It set up expectations that it didn't fail to meet, while Ridgeworks didn't even bother setting expectations at all. But okay, those are genuinely the only 2 proper regions here I actively dislike, so I think it's about time we knock out that last rotted region. It's probably weird to hold this region in higher regard than the other rot regions, much less any of the actual new regions, but Infested Waste, the artist formerly known as Garbage Waste, stands out amongst a bunch because it's weirdly high effort compared to the rest. It's the only one that adds new rooms. The gnarly destroyed room at the bottom right is the highlight of all the rotted regions, and it's got the nastiest, most diverse set of spawns to boot. The only red centipede in all of the Watcher, which, yeah, makes traversing this region particularly miserable, even amongst rotted regions, but in a sick, twisted way, good, I think. That's kind of the point. It sucks the most, so it's the most effective, or something. I just think the rot loachers are really cool. Functionally identical to the normal ones, but I didn't think they could get any freakier, and oh boy did they prove me wrong. But Infested Waste holds a special place in my heart because it was the first one of the rotted regions I ended up in, and also the only time I ever experienced a creature despawn glitch. So I just got to roam around this hecked up, completely barren version of Garbage Waste, and it was genuinely unsettling in a way that little else has ever made me feel. Which makes me a little sad that's not even by design, cause like, I feel like in this case, nothing is scarier, you know? Seeing a once vibrant location now completely devoid of life, genuinely creepier than what we did get. Oh well, at least I can't take away my own personal experience. Alright, enough heartfelt moments, time to get back to dunking on Aether Ridge. The other tragedy of the surface is that of all the regions in the Watcher, it may well be the region with the least diversity in its environments. Like, I thought I was being gaslit upon finding out that there's 3 whole subregions here, and they, for the most part, look and play exactly the same. Like, you're kidding, right? I genuinely thought I had hallucinated Fallen Tramway when I was first trying to catalog all the Watcher regions, back before the wiki had been updated. Like, did I just confuse it with Aerial Tramway? Nope, it exists, and it's the best part of the surface, apparently. And I know I gave Tundrafall, let's say, faint praise a few minutes ago for having better spawns and better room design to the surface, but frankly, it's mostly just a lack of Wormgrass and notched a whopping 2 placements higher on this 44 item list. Cause in pretty much every other aspect, it's virtually identical, yeah. I guess, it has Blizzard Lizards. They're really funny in how stupid and overpowered they are. I also just think Tundrafault is a really funny name, the same way I think Blasted Steps from Silksong is really funny, for no adequately explained reason. It's those blasted steps, Lois. It's their Tundrafault. I don't even watch Family Guy. I have no clue why I'm making these stupid jokes. That's my favorite part about Tundrafault. Its name. Yeah, this is barely scraping seed chip just because I think it's fine, and I wanted to separate it from the servers in at least some notable way. Mostly that last part, honestly. Right, it's been fun, but I really cannot justify putting most of the remaining prologue regions any higher than this. I'm not gonna spend too much time talking about any of these regions individually because, well, I already did that, and they're, for the most part, virtually unchanged. And thankfully, none of these regions have their respective subregions accessible, so I don't even have to bother including them out of obligation. Yippee! It's not like much of the rest of the regions have changed either. All of them have a few spots blocked off by rot, but you can still access and explore most of them. The creature spawns are almost virtually unchanged from Gormon's campaign, so they're fairly manageable. They all remain pretty much as good as they ever were. And yes, I do think they're all pretty good regions. I kinda regret lowballing Shaded as much as I did in my original ranking. I love that place. The reason I ranked them all so low here, and amusingly in the exact opposite order I ranked them last time, is that in the Watcher, their functions are vastly different. They're no longer spaces to explore and learn to survive in, they're mostly skill checks for the various abilities the Watcher gets from Spinning Top. Chimney is the easiest echo to get to, requiring a mere 3 karma instead of 5, but you do have to do a moderately tough climb up the region to prove your mettle. And after your first meeting, you get automatically set to 5 karma and get Neuron Glow, making Shaded pretty much free to traverse through. And after your second meeting, you get your invisibility power, allowing you to pass the Outskirts Scavenger toll for free. Game design. It's not necessarily the intended path. You're free to go to all 3 Spinning Top locations in whatever order you want, and because I'm a gremlin, of course I went through Shaded first, mostly in an attempt to get to Moon, mind you, as I always do at the start of every campaign, and then Outskirts second, getting my Scavenger rep pretty high in the process, which frankly, you should always be doing at the start of any non-Artificer campaign, so it all worked out in the end. The ranking of the 3 here is admittedly fairly arbitrary, but I do have my reasons. For one, Outskirts being the lowest of the 3, it's mainly because, like, so in Chimney and Shaded, there's multiple paths to cross the region, you're free to take whichever pleases you most, but with Outskirts, if you already know your goal, there's literally no reason to explore most of the region since you should just beeline your way to the Farmer Raised Gate. And Shaded above Chimney is a bit more arbitrary, but I just like that Shaded changes the most depending on if you visit it first, second, or third. If you go there first, you get the standard Dark Shaded experience, if you go there second, you get Neuron Glow, and if you go there third, the rot has regressed so far that it actually lightens the rooms to a dim purple in a way I think looks fantastic. Chimney is just neat, yeah, that's all. I'm glad all these regions are here as another clever way to ease returning players back into Rainbow before it hits you with the new stuff, the same way I accept Gourmand's role as Downpour's Welcome Back campaign, but I do think this is a much more efficient, and much cooler might I add, way to go about it. It's free game design. Anyway, speaking of the prologue, it is honestly a fantastic punchline that, after receiving the fewest changes in Downpour and accidentally becoming the smallest region in the game by screen count, Industrial Complex finally gets its own sub-area, and Hydroponics is a pretty neat one too. They do a cool bit of not playing any threat music here to leave you guessing where exactly in the world you are before the big reveal. I thought I was gonna end up in Outskirts, but like, just above the Outskirts gate, close enough, yeah? The sub-region is also distinct enough from anything else in Industrial Complex, hell, anything else in the main game. It slots really well into the more functional procedural way a lot of the more industrial areas in the Watcher are designed, and it whets the player's appetite for new stuff while also letting them cut their teeth on a mildly tricky bit of navigation and platforming. Not too large, not too challenging, but it's just a quaint little area. I also find it hilarious to be unceremoniously dropped back in that one room every time you meet Spinning Top, all while seeing it get progressively rotted, and even funnier when it happens again during the final ending, because of course it does. Bookends, baby, that's the good stuff. I can't really justify putting a tiny baby little subregion that doesn't have anything remarkable about it any higher than this, but hey, I like that we got it at all. Okay, back to the new stuff, kind of. Here's more Aether Ridge. On one hand, cold storage is basically just Purple Ridgeworks. Crow, why have you put it exactly 10 spots higher? I'm glad you asked. I like purple more than blue. That's all. Anyways, our next region is... Okay, I'm joking. I do think cold storage has a lot more to offer than Ridgeworks, and I generally don't find myself actively avoiding it in the same way, but it's hard to point out all that much it does differently. For one, it's got wind. Okay, I don't know if that's a positive, but I don't mind it all that much, barring a few spots where it feels kind of abrupt or cheap. But okay, as for the actual positives, it's a little less sprawling and maze-like, it doesn't loop in on itself quite as much, and individual rooms tend to stand out a bit more. There's a good mix of indoors pipe rooms and outdoors platforming challenges. I can actually figure out where I am in the region just by the room I'm in instead of having to whip out the map for the 20th time. Also, it's got, like, actual lore. It's a storage facility for creatures that are being experimented on, perhaps for their purpose in some way. Standard lizards kept in cages, while the more biologically modified cyan lizards freely roam the region at a higher density than anywhere else in the Watcher. That's not even touching on the rhino-infested horrors of Station Annex, which, well, we'll save that for later, obviously. obviously. Point is, it at least sparks intrigue. I at least care about the region, and it's markedly more fun to explore than the other Aether Ridge regions we've touched on so far, but its notable qualities pretty much end there, cause like, yep, it sure is more Aether Ridge, alright. But purple, which bumps it up a tier. Anyways, oh my god, Video Cult, you have got to be kidding me. I cannot believe y'all made me play through the depths again. I cannot believe I'm ranking it on another Rain World region tier list. Actually, I guess it's fairly believable, but I'm still mad about it. Like, yeah, okay, the vibe is completely different this time around. Between the golden cracks and the endless sea of Skullcat phases, it's gone from surreal to beyond surreal, but it is also, you know, not even the entire depths, just the trippy cave part on the way to the Void Sea. My game theory is that the Watcher turns into the Weaver, by the way. I don't know where else to put this, so I'm dropping it here. But again, the ending sequence itself doesn't count for my ranking, so I feel like I may as well just place it right around where I did last time. About a third of the way up the list, near the top of C tier. Yeah, that feels about right. Okay, so I know y'all are tired of hearing me whine about Aether Ridge, especially since I still haven't gotten to the one I know you're all waiting for, but I promise this is the last time for a bit, and hey, I actually think this one is almost good. In fact, in terms of vibes and content, I'd say I like what Aerial Tramway has to offer more than, oh god, the next 6 regions on the list, none of which, spoilers by the way, are Aether Ridge regions, so yeah, Aerial Tramway is really cool. For all 5 seconds of it. Barring farm arrays, it's the smallest region in the Watcher, and I think that's a little unfortunate, because I, in theory, love this place. Like, for one, it's the first region I encountered them, the famous Rain World moths from Rain World. I adore these things. They are incredible, and I have been fixated on them for the past half year. I love you, Moth. This is a great environment to first encounter them in, by the way. Just idly observing you, never really getting in the way, fitting in with the desaturated, frosty atmosphere of the region perfectly. It's also a pretty solid linear gauntlet with some of the better wind-based platforming in the Watcher, where in one direction the wind serves more as an obstacle than anything, and in the other, it exclusively works in your favor to make the climb easier. I also think that it's really cool that you get to go inside the trams for a few rooms. I always wanted to go in the trains in Subterranean, but they never let me. This is more than enough of a consolation prize. Aerial Tramway is also just really nice as an introduction to the rest of Aether Ridge proper. It's not all that tricky, but it's just challenging enough that it makes the run-up feel like a bit more of a proper journey, and there's a bit of suspense as to what you'll find at the end of the trail, too. And all of that is entirely by design, since this was one of the intended entrances to the original Aether Ridge mod, so yeah, job well done on this one. I just wish there was more, that's all. And as promised, here's finally the first non-Ra, non-base game, non-Aether Ridge region on the list. The real ranking begins here, or something, a Lime Milana reference. Fitting, actually, given what region it is. Oh man, Torrid Desert, you're really cool on paper. You have a lot going for you, so why am I so underwhelmed? Why are you so bland? Like, I know deserts are really boring IRL, but you didn't have to translate that part of them to the region. I think Torrid Desert got screwed specifically by being in the Watcher, honestly. If this were a base game or downpour region, it'd stand out a lot just on aesthetics alone, but in the scope of the Watcher, I just feel like everything this region does, other regions do better. For one, it's not even the only desert region in the Watcher, and Badlands just hits the notes of what I'd want from a desert region a lot better than this one. And the region's unique creatures, well, I'd already seen the drill crabs and rusted wrecks, so that wasn't new. The golden scavs are pretty cool, but me and my maxed scav wrap never really had to contend with them, like ever. And they show up in plenty of other places anyways. The box worms, better using heat ducks. The sand grubs, I mean, fun new food source. I don't think they work correctly though, or at least I can never manage to sneak up on them properly. But no, the actual biggest problem I have with Torrid Desert is that, like, why is so much of it this boring underground temple area? It's a genuine disservice to this region's vibes to have more than half of it take place in a bunch of really samey looking rooms of really repetitive architecture. A problem that a few other Watcher regions have. We'll be getting to some of the other big offenders on that front pretty soon, don't you worry. This just happens to be the one I find the most egregious. It's just super easy to get lost, even going in a straight line somehow. There's, again, nothing really wrong with Torrid Desert. Hell, I think the upper and right areas of the region are pretty neat, if nothing all that remarkable, and I guess having a more pleasant desert to contrast the harsher vibes of Badlands isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's certainly more unique than Ridgeworks or Cold Storage, and if it had even a tiny bit bit more going on, it might have scraped the bottom of B tier, but I am just so disappointed by this one. It's just not quite there, and it so easily could have been, but no, it's just kind of boring. You know what else is boring? My favorite region in the base game. Not gonna spend too much time here because, again, very little has changed about Industrial Complex since Downpour. The paths to Garbage Waste and Pipe Yard are sealed off now, but like, that's about it. Other than that, it's exactly the same Industrial Complex I know and love, one of the most beautifully designed, ecologically and geographically diverse regions in the game, and unlike the other Prologue regions, which function more as tunnels to their respective echoes, Industrial retains its purpose as a hub area you travel through multiple times. During the first hour or so of the campaign anyways. Yeah, that's the thing. This isn't like your long-term home anymore. It's just the start of your journey. You can't return to it once you leave the Prologue. Well, until the very final ending sequence, but like, that barely counts. I am fundamentally unable to rank one of my favorite regions a single tier lower, even in this completely arbitrary ranking exercise, but I cannot justify putting it over even some of the middest new regions added to the Watcher because, at the very least, they're permanent fixtures in the campaign, so bottom of B tier it goes. And that was, finally, the last repeat region of the ranking, so the entire rest of the list is all new stuff, baby. Now then, let's talk about the Stormy Coast problem. Stormy Coast managed to have the exact opposite problem as Aether Ridge with the exact same root cause. They took a complete region and chopped it into bits. In Stormy Coast's case, the problem is that it wasn't that big in the first place. It was about as big as the average Downpour region, as opposed to the nightmarish monstrosity of Aether Ridge, yet they chopped it into 4 distinct regions, only one of which felt appropriately sized. Although, as of 1.5, there's 2 now, the smallest one got a huge glow up, which leaves Torrential Railways as the ugly child of the bunch now. Big shame, too, because the vibes are incredible. The whole region is one massive structure towering over a flooded railway, and that's also kind of the problem. There's basically 3 types of rooms in the region: indoors room, train room, structure room. Several versions of each of these. Probably the region with the least architectural diversity in the entire game, which is especially bad when it's now also the smallest proper region in the game. It's also painfully easy, even by base game standards, but especially by Watcher standards. Very low creature density, with leeches and salamanders that barely matter if you stay out of the water to begin with, and a whopping 2 blue lizards patrolling the big structural areas. And only one of the bridge rooms even lets you fall to your death. Most of the quote-unquote pits in the region are just over water. It's harder to die in Torrential Railways than it is to live in it. I feel like what this region really needed was to just be part of Stormy Coast, lightning gimmick and all. Would at least make Torrential Railways a bit more dangerous. It'd benefit both regions to be stretched together, and it would provide them both with a bit more geographical diversity. It's not like there aren't other complete regions in the Watcher that have distinct areas like this. Even if you just kept it as a sub-region of Stormy Coast, that'd feel a lot better than what we did get. The only logical reason I can think of that they subdivided Stormy Coast as much as they did is that they wanted to show off all the different weather effects present in the original Stormy Coast mod, and to their credit, I agree. It makes the other Stormy Coast regions feel a lot more distinct, completely changes their vibes despite a lot of aesthetic and architectural similarities. But Torrential Railways weather is just Stormy Coast weather sans the threat of lightning. So again, why separate them? I don't know, man, it just makes me sad. Both regions could have been so much better for it. The only reason this region is up this high is, man, I love the rain. The kind that doesn't kill you to death, I mean. As a Seattle resident, I'm kinda obligated to like rain. Okay, well, it doesn't actually rain that much here, and I kinda wish it rained more often, honestly. Rain's just pleasant. I love existing in Torrential Railways, I just wish I actually liked playing it more, you know? Speaking of regions with cool vibes that are kinda let down by their gameplay. Verdant Waterways is another region that's really cool in theory, but kind of underwhelming in its execution. For starters, the run-up from the far right portal is fantastic. A shoreline-esque swim to the gateway, the background progressively getting darker room over room, being able to see the rising and lowering water gimmick before actually needing to interact with it, a few rooms that show it off real well right after, and then you get to the rest of the region and realize, oh, that was kinda it, huh? I think the bulk of Verdant is another region that suffers from samey room syndrome. The top half has a bunch of these kinda cool pillar rooms, and a few of them have some solid platforming, but the charm wears off after a while. And the bottom half is just more water puzzles that don't really iterate on the ideas you already saw at the start of the region, namely because there's not actually a lot you can do with this gimmick. Either you wait at the tide or you try a daring swim and just hope for the best, and given there's not much pressure from creatures in this region, nor much bubbleweed to be found, you might as well just wait, you know? Which isn't really all that fun. I do think the really tall pipe room at the left of the region is a cool set piece, one of, if not the tallest room in the game, a whopping 7 screens tall, and almost completely devoid of stuff in the the middle. Oh, and there's a portal right here, so yeah, that'll happen. Honestly, I think it's too funny to be mad at. If there's one other thing in this region I take issue with, it's so green, oppressively green. Undergrowth was exactly the right amount of green for me. This is just way too much. And yeah, I know, there's other monochrome regions in the Watcher, sure, but this is the only one that really bugs me to look at for so long. It's exhausting. I'm just not a fan of green, I guess, or at least not this shade of green. At the very least, the region does stand out, and not just for its eye-searing greenness, but it's the first region we've talked about that feels singular, unique. In its aesthetics, sure, but also just in a gameplay sense. It's got more developed gameplay than Torrential or Torrid, it's easier to traverse than most of the Aether Ridge regions we've covered, and it's got a unique gimmick that no other region shares. It's got a lot of positive qualities, just none of them all that positive, I suppose. To book in this segment with some more praise, I think the top exit path out of the region is also pretty neat. It's a lot of platforming and swimming through rooms absolutely infested with monster kelp, rooms that would be utterly miserable without the Watcher's invisibility power, but you can't just blindly cheat your way past the kelp either because they will still feel you. And going through the broken Karma Gate right before the end is a nice touch too. Maybe not a great look that the region's best moments are all either when you're entering or leaving it, but hey, it's not nothing. You know what else isn't nothing? Existential horror. Okay, well, technically, this was the actual first Rada region I discovered, but it's so much different from the others that I feel like it's kind of just its own thing. Because, like, this is the big one. The development has evolved and become even more unfortunate than before. So unfortunate that there's nothing left, not even the rod itself. Ascending through familiar rooms, now completely desolate and lifeless until you see something moving in the background. A giant rot creature? Spooky. And you just keep going until the world just stops, and the rotworm zooms in from out of frame to give you the scare of your life. God damn it, it's so good. Is there any other game that can do what Rainworld does? I kinda doubt it, man. Admittedly, after that point, the experience is kind of over. Just a few rooms left and you leave and are plopped into Outer Rim, which I understand why this region goes to Outer Rim, and it was my first time ending up there because I am, again, a very good creature and would never disobey the game's warnings, but I feel like Outer Rim is supposed to be a punishment mechanic, and being sent there simply for just exploring sends a bit of a mixed signal. And it's not really a fall of unfortunate evolution itself, but I kinda wish there wasn't another portal right near its entrance. Having to claw your way through the entirety of Station Annex just to see what lies beneath would make the run-up that much more effective, certainly more so than merely jaunting your way through the last few rooms of the sub-region and then dipping immediately. Unfortunate evolution is a bit too light on the gameplay side to go all that much higher for me, and it's kind of a one and done. You don't get the same spook factor, that same buildup of suspense and payoff on any subsequent visit, but man, that first visit is always gonna stick with you. It's a real treat. And okay, sure, the other small vibe space region next, yeah. Damon would be a lot lower if I was doing this ranking pre 1.5, mind you, because at that point it was just a cool way to get to the ending sequence and not much more. I guess you could also willingly send yourself to Outer Rim if you wanted to, but why? But now it's got, you know, a lot more to it. For one, it's just a lot more visually interesting. The golden eyes that pop up and follow your movements are creepy as hell, and the first time one of those things moved, I kinda jumped in my seat a little. Like, oh, that's new. It's also got the endings hub, the hub that tracks endings, in a very cryptic manner, of course, but hey, that's kinda just par for the course with the Watcher. And of course, Damon's last trick, the lead up to the final ending. Meeting the Weaver in the Infinite Void, low gravity platforming up another really tall room, though not as tall as Vernon Waterway's big pipes. Sorry, Damon, try again next time. And the game really having fun with the looping borders before you pop back out in the hub. I do think the region is probably not as cool as Unfortunate Evolution, but you at least have a reason to return to it, so it wins in the functionality department, and it was still really cool to see on a first time playthrough, and even cooler to see what it evolved into after the update. Never gonna be one of my favorites to explore, but it's good for what it's trying to be, yeah. Okay, I've left it alone for long enough. It's finally time for some more Aether Ridge. It feels a little weird to put Shattered Terrace this high. It's one of the smallest regions left, and it feels even smaller than it actually is, cause like, one of the region's main purposes is as a hub, a small, relatively safe area where you can farm a ripple level or two, maybe even more after how much extra food they added in 1.5, that also ties 3 other regions together. Granted, you have to open all 3 of those portals from the other side, so the first time you get here, it just feels weirdly empty, a little bit confusing, and there's this one gap that used to be nigh impossible to cross without max ripple, which I kinda wish they left it that way, actually. Hell, I wish they made it harder to cross, cause the other major function of the region is as a gateway to the campaign's first ending, and I think said run-up is much more effective if you come here from Damon. Certainly a lot cooler than make a jump and go through a few more rooms anyways. Granted, I think those rooms are pretty neat either way you travel. For one, the aesthetic of Shattered Terrace is stunning. The drab gray buildings contrasted with the harsh winds and the tears and ripple space. There's so much motion happening all the time. The world looks alive in a way nowhere else in Rain World does. And with Spinning Top's echo effect, it just makes it feel all the more ethereal. It's really cool. Plus, the platforming is pretty fun too. The one thing I'll concede is the left path does better than the right path. I love how weird and windy the path gets, and how there's some teeny tiny rooms tucked away in the big room at the center too. It's level design that tickles my brain just right. All that being said, it's a region that rides off its vibes and its function more than its actual design, and frankly, it's not even all that useful as a hub. Because they're all Spinning Top's portals, the locations they lead to are all so far out of the way that you're honestly better off just random warping out. And you don't have much of a reason to stay here too long, nor do you really have a reason to revisit the region, unless you really want to go back to Ancient Urban. Basically, Shattered Terrace is really cool, but you don't really play Rain World in it all that much, so I can only rank it so high. It's just playable enough that it goes above the last 2 vibes-based regions though, yeah. You can, like, actually die here, so apparently that's a positive quality. As for this next region, what else can I say other than, man, talk about a glow-up. If I'd done this list at launch, you bet your bottom dollar that Sunlight Port would have been way down towards the bottom of the list, like high D tier at best, because Sunlight Port was just so nothing. It was the first region I got sent to after the prologue, and it seemed really cool, but I found an exit pretty quick and just decided, yeah, I'll explore the rest later. Turns out I missed like 1 or 2 rooms, including the other exit portal. Oops, yeah, Sunlight Port got hit the hardest by the massacring of Stormy Coast. But wait, Sunlight Port, what's that? You said the region was called Sunbaked Alley. Well, yeah, it is now, and it's like several times bigger than it used to be. It's an actual region now, with actual room for exploration. Whoa! And thank God, because the region's vibes are just so pleasant. It was such a shame to see them wasted on such a dinky little region. And all of the new rooms added are pretty dang good, and pretty distinct to boot. It leans into the rather procedural architecture that the Watcher regions really love, but this time none of its rooms blend together. They all kind of have their own thing to them, and it makes exploring them all a delight. All without sacrificing the region's original rooms to boot. I am, of course, a big fan of that arbitrary little swimming section for as short as it is, but the right side of the region leads a lot more into raw platforming and makes some pretty fun, if basic, challenges out of it. For as much as I enjoy the architecture of the region, I do think the creatures let it down a little bit. It's the apparently requisite centipede hell of the Watcher. They're goddamn everywhere in this region, and I just do not ever find centipedes a fun obstacle to deal with, especially in this density, and especially of how little Watcher's invisibility helps to deal with them if they're in your way. Other than that, you get lizards mostly. Not the most exciting, I suppose, but they get the job done. Also, and this is the dumbest nitpick, but never has a region's threat theme felt more unfitting than this. I'm barely talking about music in this video unless it's a tune that really stands out, and man, this one sure doesn't stand out for the better. It sounds more like Among Us Trap remix than an actual threat team, I swear. And it just feels way too dark and foreboding for one of the brighter, cozier regions in the game. I know that's because it's gotta fit in with the rest of the Stormy Coast threat themes, but like, could afford to lighten up a little, you know? And the region is still a little, you know, basic, doesn't really have its own thing. It's just a lot of brickwork and pipes, a phrase that describes more base game regions than not. And it's bigger now, but it's still not that big, even by Watcher standards. It's not even the winner of the most improved 1.5 award. We'll get to that one way later. Just a really rock solid region that doesn't have much objectionable about it, but doesn't really excel in any way either. Perfect for the middle of the list. And right above it, we have proof positive that I don't think there's a single truly unsalvageable region in the Watcher, because even the weakest regions still have at least one part I like. Which, it's funny, because earlier I mentioned not even remembering Fallen Tramway existed, yet here it is, a whopping 16 spots higher than the last surface subregion we talked about. And in a lot of ways, it isn't all that different from the other 2 parts of the region too, so what's it doing up this high, you may ask? Well, for starters, it's just a lot more interesting to traverse. It feels like all the juiciest parts of the region are here. You get the spooky overhang room with a portal in it, the long snowdrift room that leads to another portal, the big lantern room on the way to a pretty tricky wind-based platforming gauntlet that leads to a third portal. Oh yeah, most of the region's portals are aggregated here, by by the way, so it's the part of the region you most want to be in just for that reason alone. And it's of course got the appeal of being an alternate version of another region, the aerial tramway, where you can pretty easily compare the two and see just how much has collapsed over time. It kinda gives off Silent Construct vibes in that way. Not the only effective use of this trope in The Watcher either, but more on that later. Admittedly, the aforementioned wind platforming is wind platforming. It's a little janky as per usual, especially around poles, and it's not pure platforming. You do still have to contend with lizards along the way who will gladly waste your time if you're not willing to be a bit aggressive with them. It's not the hardest thing ever, but there are enough pain points that it's not exactly my favorite platforming gauntlet ever either. I still dig it though. But the big reason I really love this region is because it's like the only part of the surface that uses the heat meter effectively. The only time where you really feel the pressure of the weather. Cause yeah, you're under a fairly strict time crunch here. Mess up too much and you're gonna freeze to death before you make it to the end. And the trek is surprisingly long from the nearest shelter, so the stakes get pretty dang high. It's thrilling. Basically, Fallen Tramway has the same aesthetic appeal as the other two parts of the surface, but it's also just got by far the best gameplay of the region, which makes it the only part of the region I'm ever really happy to see. And thank God, because it'd be such a shame to waste vibes this cool on 3 crappy subregions, you know? Which, speaking of, the other real stinker of Aether Ridge also has its one good part too. Admittedly, the gap between Blast Deck and, say, Aerial Tramway isn't as stark as the gap between Fallen Tramway and the rest of the surface, but of the generic Aether Ridge subregions, it's by far my favorite, mostly because it's filled with platforming for sickos, and I am, as you may have already figured out, a sicko when it comes to platforming. The defining feature of Blast Deck is the presumably freezing cold water that just immediately kills you if you touch it. Eat your heart out, past garbage waste acid. It's essentially just a death plane, but you best believe you're gonna get pretty dang close to it with all the jumping and climbing you're expected to do in these rooms. Some of the platforming gets really mean too. There's lots of teeny tiny platforms you can barely stand on, high ledges you have to clamber onto, long jumps you can just barely make, even some tight spaces where you have to wall jump or perish. This indoor boiler room is probably the most vile room in the region, and going through it is terrifying each and every time. Hell yeah. And unlike Ridgeworks, Blast Deck feels a lot more visually diverse. You get some of those darker indoors rooms alongside the brighter platforming rooms, and even a few nice outdoors areas. Particularly a fan of that one boxy room. It's cool. It feels distinct, unique in a way that Ridgeworks and Cold Storage don't. Also, the moths are everywhere here, so that's at least worth an extra tier higher by itself. Moths, my beloved. Not really much else to say about Blast Deck that I haven't said about the other Aether Ridge regions I've covered, but hey, that means I don't have too much bad to say about it either. It's not overly massive or maze-like, the platforming never feels too hard or unfair, there's plenty of shelter so dying is never a huge setback, the creatures don't tend to bother you nearly as much as in Ridgeworks, it all just works. I think it's pretty neat. And not to keep banging the Aether Ridge train too much, but, well, I mean, this one only kind of counts. Because, for one, I didn't even know Fetid Glen was technically Aether Ridge until well after the fact, since it's, you know, visually not all that similar. It is, however, the most goddamn beautiful fever dream of a region I've ever seen, Jesus Christ. Maybe I'm just taken in by all the pretty colors, but there's so many different gradients of them. Every new screen is a visual delight. God, it's so pretty. And that's not to say the gloomy swamplands vibe of the region doesn't hit, it's the exact kind of grossness that Rainworld has always excelled at portraying, that's still kind of gorgeous in its own way. The overgrown mechanical ruins of, Salination? Okay, that explains why the lower rungs of the region have this absolutely devilish water section with these absolutely terrifying anglerfish, good god. It's a really neat swimming puzzle too, forcing you to stop to catch your breath in these little artificially created alcoves, and you're likely gonna need to be making good use of your invisibility to get past the anglers roaming the pipes. It's not too long, and thankfully not as hard as it used to be. Seriously, the absurd density of eel lizards pre 1.5 made it nigh impossible, even for a swimming diehard like myself. The anglerfish are a nerf, I promise. And now you actually have a reason to go this way too, with the extra rooms and portal they added down here. The rest of the region is pretty cool too. The invisible mushroom platforming is kind of silly, but it tickles my brain just right, and it's not actually that hard to figure out where to go. And most of the rest of the region is flatlands where creatures are the biggest threat, or tight confined vertical rooms that mostly serve as connections between the region's different layers. Also, it makes me want coffee for some reason, and I do like coffee. From an aesthetic and design standpoint, Fetid Glen does basically everything right. So why do I feel a little bit lukewarm on it? The creatures. Oh god, this region has by far my least favorite set of creature spawns in all of the Watcher. It's kind of ridiculous. The weed lizards are just stupid. Oh boy, I sure love being slowed down, and should I dare accidentally make physical contact with one, be poisoned for the rest of the cycle. Oh god, there's frogs everywhere. Usually I love frogs, but no, not these ones, no sir. But the worst are the goddamn spitter spiders. Already one of my least favorite creatures in the game, clogging up tight corridors and serving as a hard counter to the Watcher's invisibility. And it's not like a Saint where you at least have maneuverability to dodge them. Hate these things so much, man. They're not the worst creature spawns ever. It doesn't come close to the absurdity of some of Spearmaster's regions, and they all thematically fit within the region's theme of poison and parasites, but it sure does make for a region that's beautiful to look at and not really the most fun to, play. Far from bad, and I love the lore behind it, but I wish I could love it a lot more than I do. I feel like Fede Glen is the last region I have anything excessively negative to say about, though. Every region left is almost an entirely positive experience, although we're not quite to the level of my favorites just yet. Anyways, here's some more moths. Shrouded Coast, Stacks, is our third Stormy Coast subsection, and by a good margin the largest, which I find a little strange, honestly. The part that's mostly shipping crates? I mean, I guess. It's another region that I find myself easily getting lost in because, yeah, most rooms are either stacks of shipping crates or inside shipping crates, or inside stacks of shipping crates. But then I take a step back and realize, wait, no, it's actually pretty well segmented and navigable once you figure out how it's laid out. The crate city in the center of the map, lots of flatlands to the north, and the big tower area to the south. The latter being my favorite part of the region, admittedly. I just love climbing up tall things, and it's got a really fun shape to it too. Definitely the most notable landmark the region has to offer. The vibes here are really pleasant too. Lots of contrast between light and dark, as you're constantly switching between the foggy outdoors rooms and the dimly lit interiors, and the desaturated but colorful crates that comprise the vast majority of the region's architecture keep it from ever getting too aesthetically monochrome. Though it's probably my least favorite of all the Stormy Coast weather conditions, cause it is still a little too gray for me. It's also the region that shows off the moths the absolute best, especially with the addition of the grubs in 1.5, because now it feels like the moths get really territorial and go after you a lot more aggressively, or at least it felt that way to me. I don't think I did anything to piss them off at the very least. I love them too much to hurt them. Having them be an actual threat makes the region, a lot more dangerous anyways. Though it's also home to the one singular red lizard in any non-prologue, non-rot region of the campaign. Love that guy. So it's not fangless. Shrouded Stacks is still a little samey and a little drab admittedly, and there's barely any interesting platforming save for, again, the cool tower area, but it's a fairly unique zone that doesn't overstay its welcome, and it is kinda cozy in its own weird way. I don't know, I just like existing in this region. It's neat. No clue why they removed the spinning top location in the darkened tower room though. Now it just feels weirdly empty. Ah well. Oh, and speaking of where that portal used to go, admittedly, to the aforementioned 5 inches away from Unfortunate Evolution portal that I still don't really care for, but that's mostly because I think Station Annex is so damn cool and experiencing all of it should be mandatory. Cause it's basically the Watcher's version of Unfortunate Development, you know? Heavy implications that this was where the rot, or at least the purple variant of it, was created, intentionally or otherwise. And now it's utterly overtaken the deep labs of cold storage. For starters, I just love that you entered the region through a broken glass silo, like you're slipping into somewhere you weren't supposed to be able to reach, somewhere that someone tried to seal off, or how there's a bit of a slow burn of seeing rooms more and more infested until you hit a point where every room is just covered in purple gunk. How the few lizards that prowl these rooms are already rot infested, the only naturally occurring ones in the entire campaign. It emphasizes just how fricked this area is, and the foreshadowing inherent by cold storage's overly purple aesthetic is just icing on the cake. It's so good. It's also pretty cool to navigate. While lore-wise it's quite similar to Unfortunate Development, in pretty much every other way it's the exact opposite. Avoidance challenges in tight corridors, mildly scary platforming rooms that keep you on your toes, and rather than a long zero-gravity ascent, you're working with gravity to descend down to Station Annex's lowest depths. It's cool how symmetrical and yet distinct it feels. How much you enjoy this region is, of course, going to be up to how much you can tolerate a slower-paced linear gauntlet versus the usual more explorable areas, but it's not exhaustingly long, nor is it as punishingly difficult as its sibling, and its vibes are simply immaculate. Wild how running up a fairly mediocre region makes it a lot more interesting, huh? I just like purple, man. And on that note, oh hey, more purple, woo! one of the more divisive regions in the Watcher, given that it's both one half of Rain World Desert Bus, as we all immediately agreed to call it, and one half the central hub for everything to do with the Prince's questline, which is mechanically really annoying, and I will not argue against that. Really, I don't like the whole rotting regions thing in general. It both tends to make them aesthetically homogenous and also, like, miserable to play, because they weren't designed around having overpowered lizards and those stupid clams everywhere. And the actual mechanics of spreading the rot amount to either random warping and hoping to get lucky, or waiting for the right portal room to get infected. It's not that bad if you're already region hopping a lot, and the new manual warp they added in 1.5 helps a bit, but it's not fun. I'm choosing not to hold that against the region itself though, but the long climb through a half dozen rot vine rooms on the other hand, I quite like actually. It's the kind of thing that's like technically dangerous, but if you're even a little bit careful, you shouldn't really die. It's a lot less scary than it looks basically, and it creates a ton of suspense on a first time visit, the same way Unfortunate Evolution does, just with a lot more like actual gameplay involved. The vibes are simply incredible. I do not know what else to tell you. I love it. Does it kind of suck on a replay? I don't know, maybe if you're like really impatient, but I don't mind it that much. Realistically, if you understand why you ended up in Outer Rim in the first place, the only reason you should have to do the climb again is either because you chose to warp to Outer Rim from Damon, or you ended up here from Unfortunate Evolution, which, yeah, the latter kind of sucks. I've already said my piece on that. But more often than not, you kind of have to like choose to redo it, because the way you're supposed to revisit the throne is through the 4 portals you open from the hub rooms. Portals that conveniently are guaranteed to infect 4 uninfected regions for you, and serve as a great place to restock your karma flowers for further rot infection. It's actually not too awful or time consuming to do using the throne as a hub, even if it's still not like fun, but it's good game design. And of course, there's the crown jewel of the region itself, the Prince. He's pretty fun, yeah. I'm not actually all that taken with him as a character, but it's nice to have like literally one other living thing to talk to in this otherwise incredibly lonely campaign. The lore implications are kind of horrifying though, in a good way mind you. I'd normally end the segment here, but the final ending kind of threw a wrench in that, because now there's an extra little bit of the throne in the ending sequence that's, man, it's giving Saint vibes, but at an even more horrifying scale. The end of everything, huh? And it may well all be your fault. What have you done, Watcher? And because I don't know where else to put it, this little bit of Outer Expanse, some other similarly colorful wilderness, my pet theory is that this is Outer Rim and the throne pre-rot infection, because like the long open grassy field, the climb up the slug tree, Outer Expanse, Outer Rim, you see the vision, right? And god, it's so pretty. I wish this segment was exactly as long as the Desert Bus Walk, because I'd love to spend more time here. But yeah, the throne, et al. Pretty neat place. Woo, okay, we're finally reaching the first of the wholly new regions added in the 1.5 update, which, yeah, says a lot about how rock solid they all are that it took until the top third of the list to reach any of them, huh? Crab fact, I think Migration Path is pretty dang cool. What other region tells it to you straight what exactly it's going to be about? It's quite literally the migration path of the drill crabs. You get to watch them migrate, hell yeah. And I find it interesting that the small ones feel threatened by Watcher, but the big ones just do not care at all. It's not like the smaller ones don't already tower over you anyways. Nature is weird, I suppose. The aesthetic of the region is also just really nifty. The long, slow gradient from red to blue as you travel along the surface, the trail itself bearing a lot of resemblance to the train tracks of Subterranean, and the spooky underground rooms that almost feel like they're underwater, what with the occasional bubble that floats by. The whole place feels gloomy and forlorn despite being one of the most populated regions in the game. I also suspect they added this new region to show off the peach lizards and their barnacle-busting jaws, because they're like basically the only creature in the entirety of the middle underground area. Love these little guys. They're like especially stupid, even for a lizard, but they're so dang helpful getting those goddamn barnacle crabs out of the way. Amazing. I may be letting recency bias affect my placement a little bit with this one, because like, it's not the most engaging region gameplay-wise, it's one of the most linear and least challenging in all of the Watcher, but hey, having so little friction means that I just get to soak into vibes all that much more easily. Being cool can get you pretty far with me. But okay, yeah, having that little bit of gameplay spice is generally preferred, case in point. Fractured Gateways is another case of a fairly acceptable region, in this case Verdant Waterways, getting a significant improvement by being utterly destroyed. Long gone is the pumping mechanism, long dimmed is the searing green, now it's just my kind of dreary and barren. And it's kind of a sister region to Migration Path in my mind, because it's another new addition and it's similarly linear and spectacle based, but this time there's like actual threats to deal with, namely the swarm of locusts fresh out of Badlands, here to ruin your day a second time. Nah, I kid, they've done a lot of work to improve the locusts since launch, and now I think they're a damn solid mechanic that makes both regions they appear in all the the more interesting for having them. Though, frankly, even if they hadn't tweaked the logos at all, I don't think it'd matter much here, cause, like, the actual intended challenge of the region wouldn't change at all. Because the other major players in this region are the Sky Whales, who have come all the way from Signal Spires to save the day yet again. I love how these two pre-existing mechanics were mashed together in such a cool way. It's honestly kind of brilliant. Like, it's just so easy to intuit what you're supposed to do here, but it feels like a cool discovery nonetheless. And yeah, I guess it's technically an auto-scroller, but like, the whales move at a fast enough clip that I don't really mind. I do think there are a few questionable design decisions, namely the whole alternate path branching out from the left of where Spinning Top drops you. It's like, pointless. You need float to even access it at all, and all it really has is a Daemon portal, which those are dime a dozen in the campaign, so it lets you skip a few of the Logos rooms, I guess, but it's hardly an easier path with the excess of sandworms. I also think there being a cop-out exit just past the lower shelter is a little lame. Like, I get that that's the only other portal if you don't come here via Spinning Top, but being allowed to just leave seems weird, especially since, and this is the big whoa moment of the region, that last whale room is so good. The way the game baits you into thinking it'll be business as usual, crossing the sandy dunes under the cover of a whale before the absolute guy shows up. God damn it, Video Cult, you can't keep getting me like that. Thank you. I don't know, man. This region is just plain awesome. Only reason it's not higher is that you genuinely have no reason to ever go here a second time, but for a spectacle region, it sure makes you earn that spectacle, and I love having to earn my whoa moments. Anyways, y'all know I love a good bookend, so let's end off the beach here the same way it basically started, with Stormy Coast. Yeah, all 4 parts of Stormy Coast in the same tier, though to be clear, I think mainland Stormy Coast is a lot better than Torrential Railways, and the only real thing holding it back is how bloody small it is. But I already went on that rant already, I ain't gonna waste time repeating myself. Anyways, part of why I like Stormy Coast so much is, of course, the vibes. Yes, the rain for one, but I also just like how gloomy it is. Good stretch of the list for gloomier regions apparently. I've used that word so much these past few segments that I had to go back and edit it out of the last segment because I was getting annoyed at how much I was using it, but I cannot think of a better word to describe Gloomy Coast than that one, and I love that about it. It's also got, like, an actual gameplay gimmick alongside its weather, and one that's remarkably well executed. You're given just enough time to find cover thanks to the pre-lightning strike indicators, so it never feels like a cheap shot when you do get struck, and it really makes you think about your routing through rooms in a way that few other regions do. Best exemplified in the big platforming room that's absolutely one of my favorite pieces of level design in all of The Watcher, especially with how well it integrates into the region's aesthetic. And it's just so much more architecturally diverse than any other of its siblings. Several memorable set pieces, very few rooms that blend together. It's got a good mix of everything that makes Rainworld level design so interesting. It's just plain fun to explore. I sure wish there were more of it. No, I promised I'd stop. But honestly, more than any of that, the reason I've got Stormy Coast up so high despite my big grievance with it is that, like, I so often caught myself thinking, man, I really want to get back to Stormy Coast. Especially when I was working on the Rod and Weaver quest, cause like, something about the region just makes it feel good to be in. It's got like the opposite problem as Aether Ridge, the Stormy Coast positive emotional aura. Its small size and relative lack of difficulty make it the ideal hub for most of the game's more annoying quests, apparently. I can't really justify exactly why that is, but I don't really think I need to either, cause I don't get the sense that anyone really dislikes this region. I've seen plenty of tier lists. I know what y'all do and don't like, I know what my own hot takes are, and I know for damn certain putting Stormy Coast this high ain't one of them. It's probably a hotter take that I didn't put this region higher. I would've if it was bigger, I promise. I can't get over that, sorry. Anyways, we've still got a dozen genuinely great regions to get through, starting with, ooh, a big one. One of the quotes I always see tossed around is how Rainworld was designed to emulate the feeling of being a rat in a New York City sewer. So like, when I got sent to Ancient Urban and one of the first things I saw was a literal rat in a literal sewer, it had me going like, wait, are we really doing this? Did the devs just straight up put the New York City sewers in Rainworld? No, they didn't, but like, I'm pretty sure that was the exact reaction they intended for me to have. Good work, y'all. And there's, of course, the sheer wonder that's omnipresent in this region, cause like, yeah, I guess we're just in an ancient city, huh? Like, yup, there they are, just past that window. God, seeing the city skyline off in the distance as you platform your way across the roofs, the vibe shifting towards the eerie as you descend into the dimly lit temple and reach the void fluid bath, Spinning Top's final heartbreaking monologue, the whole region is such an incredibly well-crafted sequence of spectacles. God. Like, there's so many other memorable set pieces I haven't even touched on. Spinning Top's room, of course, with all the toys the Watcher can play with, the ominous warehouse-looking room with the big fans, that weird octagonal room amidst the ventilation system, the hidden room where you can get pearls read, sorry, projected, oh hell yes, this. It's all stuff that in any other game would feel so mundane, but in a world full of nothing but crumbling buildings and rusted machinery, seeing just a straight up normal functioning city like this feels utterly surreal. And they could have so easily just made this region a ghost train ride of set piece after set piece, but no, it's like an actual region that you can explore. Finding your way through the maze-like sewers, platforming across buildings, crawling your way through the vents, it's proof positive that playing a cool thing is so much more engaging than being shown a cool thing, you know? Yeah, it's devoid of any hostile creatures, but I love the little rats and little moths, and it makes sense that the ancients wouldn't let anything nasty into their cities. Plus, like, you can still die here. Bottomless pits, tall falls, deep pools of sewer water to drown in. It's not a lot, but it's, again, not nothing. None of this is the main appeal of Ancient Urban, obviously. It's all about that wow factor, but God doesn't nail everything it's trying to be. It's just that, again, you have no real reason to come here a second time, unless you're really stubborn about getting all those pearls red. They didn't update the collection screen for the Watcher, so nah, I'm good, fam. Great region regardless. And oh, here we go. The part of the list you knew was coming. The part where my swimming bias really starts to show. Let's go! I pecking love swimming puzzles, baby! Yeah! Turbulent Pump has the single most variety in swimming puzzles out of any region in the game. There's a good balance between current rooms that test how precise your water movement is and long submerged rooms testing how efficient your slugcat swimming is. I think it's just so much fun to navigate through these rooms, and I don't feel like any of them are particularly hard by Rainworld swimming puzzle standards either. Plus, I love all the weird stuff this region does with its currents. Long tube rooms you can kinda just go off the flow, rooms with opposing currents that can trap you in a loop if you're not careful. This one freaky room where you have to dive underwater and then let the current suck you into a pipe. It's all super creative, and the region's just the right size for what it is, such that none of its ideas ever get stale. And even aside from the obviously beautiful visuals, I think this is my favorite sounding region in all of the Watcher, maybe all of Rainworld in general. The constant rush of water, the screeching of the barnacle crabs and the shattering of their shells echoing through the pipes, the low throb of the threat music that feels omnipresent in the region's larger rooms, and of course, Passerby, my favorite track on the entire Watcher OST. It all adds so much to the region's vibe. It's also another region that's gotten a lot better since launch. For one, the crabs actually work now, and the peach lizards help clear them out whenever they could get in your way. And I also feel like they tweaked the width of the currents to make a few of the more annoying swims a bit easier too. And the huge room they added at the top is a nice breath of fresh air compared to the claustrophobic vibe the rest of the region gives off. Oh, and it's not new, but I gotta shout out the dank dark caves at the bottom of the region too. The only real thing I can hold against Turbulent Pump is that, like, it is kind of annoying to navigate. I'm not sure there's a single other region in all of Rainworld that has this many one-way paths, courtesy of all the currents, and while the region compensates for this by not being that large, it is still pretty easy to get lost or accidentally go the wrong way and have to spend a bunch of time looping through the pipes to get back to where you were. That doesn't take away from how cool I find this region, how strong its atmosphere is, and how fun I think it is to explore, but like, yeah, it's not my absolute favorite swimming region, and even just the Watcher, much less Rainworld as a whole. Hell, it's not even my favorite part of Coral Caves. I still remember when the Watcher's first trailer and store page dropped and everyone, including myself, immediately went, oh, that's Coral Caves, they're making Coral Caves canon. Cause yeah, it's another modded region I'd played, and one I've seen plenty of times besides, one that even predates Downpour. I'd go so far as to say it's one of, if not the most iconic modded region out there, and I'd say the developers agree with me on that front, given that if you follow the intended path in the prologue, it's the region you'll be sent to first. They knew this region was a great one to lead with, probably because it's just so visually striking. It truly looks like nothing else in Rainworld. It sets the expectation that the places you're going to travel to are completely unlike those any other slugcat's ever seen. Beautiful blues, crusty coral-covered machinery, it's a vibrancy that nowhere within 5 Pebbles facility could stand a chance at matching. Plus, it's pretty dang fun to explore, too. It's another region where I feel like most every room stands out, has its own personality, which is, again, super important for helping you mentally map a region. Towers protruding into the sky, tight tunnels crawling with lizards, open ocean rooms of salamanders and big jellies, and the drier upper left area of the scary pipe drop that they thankfully made, like, actually possible without float now. And of course, what's predictably my favorite part of the region, the one that's heavily reminiscent of submerged superstructure. Okay, yeah, the bias is winning big time with this, but like, God, I love these flooded purple caves. Finding them gives off that feeling of going too deep into somewhere you really shouldn't be, and yet the urge to swim deeper down as far as you can go utterly overwhelms me. Pretty tricky swim if you can't manage to grab a jetfish too. Also, the little nudibranch buddies swarm these caves, and I love these guys. So cute, so poisonous, so friend-shaped. I'd keep one as a pet. Buddy. Really, I just think think Coral Caves is an all-around rock-solid region that does everything right, even if it doesn't really excel in any given area. It's diverse, it's beautiful as all heck, it's perfectly sized for Watcher's campaign, what's not to love? And funnily enough, the next region on our list is where that portal past the big pipe jump now leads, and the first new 1.5 region I found. The first thing that struck me about Pillar Grove was ending up in one of those big rooms with the melons and going, oh, is this an alternate version of Desolate Tract? The repetitive procedural architecture is incredibly reminiscent of Desolate, and there's a bunch of rooms that look eerily similar too. I'm honestly not completely sure if it is or not, but that's my headcanon and I'm sticking with it. No clue if it's a past or future version of the region though. I'd like to believe it's the future version, the cold, calculated, very obviously purposed machinery of Desolate Tract overgrown by vibrant green life, but given that I also have a theory that the loaches evolved from the reindeer, it could be the other way around too. Or I have it backwards and the reindeer evolved from the loaches, but then that doesn't align with the loaches' presence in infested waste and okay, no, we're not getting into this right now. Gotta focus on this incredibly lovely region instead. Pillar Grove is one of the Watcher's regions that feels closest to a base game or Downpour region, honestly. The relatively subdued color palette, the contrast of vibrant plant life against rusted brown machinery, the fairly straightforward platforming and creature spawns, but it meshes those aesthetics up with the blocky procedural architecture prevalent in a lot of the new Watcher regions. I love how rectangular so much of the region is. Not even just the structures, but the trees too. Hell, there's hardly a slope to be found anywhere in the entire region. And having that contrast of brutalist architecture alongside one of the most flourishing ecosystems in any Rainworld region creates such a wonderful contrast. It's just so pleasant. Another region with an extremely positive emotional aura. It feels like the devs were in a good mood designing Pillar Grove too, because the level design feels so playful. For whatever reason, there's an absolute cavalcade of goofy pipe mazes all over the map, most of which are in open enough spaces that you can just straight up ignore them if you want. They're just there because it's funny, and I love me a good bit. It's also a surprisingly large region, especially compared to the other 1.5 newcomers, one of the largest in the Watcher by my estimation. I was surprised at just how much I'd missed, even after a fairly decent amount of exploration on my first visit, and I continued to be surprised by how it just seemed to keep going. And yet I wasn't getting the least bit tired of it, like I would in either Rage or a Cold Storage, because it was just such a delight to exist in. Pillar Grove kind of feels like everything Farmer Race could have been. It's got a similar vibe, even with its brighter color palette. There's a lot of structures that ping the Farmer Race pattern recognition neurons in my brain, and like, the reindeer are here, so there's that, but it lacks for the gameplay annoyances that plagued Farmer Race, and the actual level design is so much more engaging without sacrificing that feeling that you're exploring a place rather than a level in a video game. The only reason it's not higher on the list is that, well, one, it's still a bit too new to me. Maybe I'll regret putting it below the next few regions in half a year's time, but two, and the bigger reason, every other region left I feel has something exceptional about it, something that makes it feel special, and that's the one thing Pillar Grove lacks. Not necessarily a knock against the region, given that it's just that damn strong of an all-rounder, it just keeps Pillar Grove from standing out quite as much in my mind, that's all. Very much unlike our number 8, which, oh boy, if I'd made this video back when the Watcher first launched, this one would have been way down near the bottom of the list. Back in March, Badlands really truly lived up to its name as one of, if not my least favorite region in the entire campaign. Sans the Rot regions, basically. I'm honestly amazed at how much they improved the Badlands experience simply by making just a few small tweaks that ironed out every single last pain point of the region while leaving the intended experience completely intact and even improved in a big way. And thank God, because I wanted to love this region, and it sucked that I couldn't, but now I can, and that only makes me love it even more. Like, this is what I want out of a desert region. Harsh terrain, grungy vibes, the palette just gives off the feeling of being a scorching hot without muddying up the screen with the usual blurry heat effects other games love using. It's a region that just feels dangerous to exist in, which, I mean, yeah, it absolutely is. The locusts are the primary hazard of the region, and boy howdy do I love them. As a hazard, not as a creature. Not a big locust fan, no. Like with Stormy Coast Lightning, they force you to think about your routing through longer rooms, but unlike with Stormy Coast, they're an ever-present threat that can swarm you in seconds if you're not careful enough. But you also have so many options to counter them. Simply staying out of their view by hiding under the region's architecture, covering yourself in mud, or getting licked by the region-exclusive skinks, or the newly added paint bobs that, more than anything else, vastly expand your means of keeping them away from you. Having basically a mobile but much more short-term solution is great in emergencies. Spore buffs work too if you can find them, or you can just, you know, turn invisible so they can only slowly track you by scent, or hide in ripple space and not deal with them at all. Of course, that's not how they were at launch, oh no. I distinctly remember turning invisible to try and climb a pole to get into a pipe, and immediately getting swarmed and killed for having the gall to think creatively. And these bastards used to be able to tear through the fabric of reality and swarm you in ripple space despite despite how not possible that should have been. Like, yeah, is it a lot more boring to deal with them that way? Sure, but you should be allowed to take that option. You've earned it, you know? And all that comes to a head in Badlands' most infamous section, the Desert Death Run. That's probably the most difficult section in all of the Watcher, even after the updates. One that I just could not be bothered to try at launch because the only viable strategy was to get a skink to lick you and then follow you the entire time. Nothing else could keep you safe long enough. And god did that sound annoying. But it felt so damn good to use a mixture of well-timed invisibility and 2 paint bobs to finally make it across those accursed rooms by my own power. Unbelievable adrenaline rush. No other game out there like this one, man. So yeah, it's just a really unique region with excellent vibes that doesn't overstay its welcome and really makes you think on your feet. It's honestly also like Farmer Race in that it's really a region about problem solving, but in this case, there's multiple much more intuitive solutions, and playing the region is like actually fun. It's Rainworld doing what Rainworld does best in new and surprising ways. Hell yeah. And up next, we've got, oh ho ho. You really should have seen this coming. You should have known that I, the swimming sicko, would love the swimming region for sickos. They made this region for me. I just know it deep down in my heart. Please ignore that it's the region was made over 5 years ago. I don't care. But like, before I get up on my high horse about Sail Nation, which is what it sounds like when you say Sail AOL Nation a bit too fast. Yes, I am insisting on pronouncing it that way just so I can make this joke. I will concede again that, yeah, at launch, it wasn't quite the best. Mostly just due to the creature spawns. Way too many barnacle crabs that loved camping in the flooded pipes where you couldn't see them, and a few too many eel lizards for comfort. Considering how long swims are already dangerous enough as is, it was a few steps too far. But much like a fed-ed Glen, they yanked out most all the crabs and all of the eel lizards and replaced them with the anglerfish. So rather than swarms of mildly dangerous creatures, you now get 1 or 2 really dangerous guys that you have to carefully stealth around. And unlike with fed-ed Glen's wider section, it feels like there's a lot more tight passages here to get the anglers off your tail or block them out entirely, keeping them from feeling as aggressively inescapable as they could have been. Of course, that only helps if you've got bubbleweed to give you time to wait, but thankfully it's goddamn everywhere in this region. If the room you're in isn't completely underwater, it's probably got bubbleweed in it somewhere. No turns or wrong turns. Even if you get a bit lost, it's all but impossible to get genuinely screwed unless you're really not managing your bubbleweed very well. Always keep one in your stomach for emergencies, y'all. Like, yeah, the region's a bit maze-like, but it's still fairly segmented, and it's far from the largest region ever, so even if you're not the biggest swimming fan, you're not gonna be lost here too terribly long. But if you do love swimming like myself, it's just big enough to give you room to explore its mix of large open rooms and flooded pipes. It's definitely the closest any region in the Watcher comes to recreating the submerged superstructure experience anyways. Yes, even more than the one that looks a lot like it. Though where those regions thrive on their natural beauty, Sail Nation is nothing but cold and mechanical. I'm not sure there's a single speck of nature anywhere in this region, save for the few outdoors rooms it has to offer, which I do think this one room with the angled wind currents is really cute. The only time in the entire campaign you see something like that. Yippee! But yeah, the vibes being so dank and gloomy is maybe not everyone's cup of tea, and it's certainly not the biggest reason I love Sail Nation, but it does make it stand out compared to its downpour equivalent. The only knock against it is that, like, Max Ripple makes it nigh impossible to traverse because you need to go invisible around the anglers, but you can't hold bubbleweed in ripple space, so you're kind of just screwed, which is more an issue of ripple space, a mechanic I really don't like if I'm being honest, than a fault of Sail Nation itself. It's a problem that affects all the water regions in the Watcher to some extent, but it's by far the most pronounced here. Sail Nation is very much a region that has exactly one goal in mind, and how much you enjoy it pretty much depends on how much you enjoy slugcat swimming, but that just makes it an acquired taste, you know? And I have acquired it. Here's where I joke about the region being flooded because of the salty tears of its haters or something. I don't know. I get it, I really do. I just don't care. I love it here. It isn't quite my favorite Aether Ridge region anyways, and here's where I fall back in lockstep with the consensus. No hot takes from me here. I don't think there's any region in Rainworld that's designed more like a platformer level than Heat Ducks. Nearly every room is designed with some kind of movement-based challenge in mind, whether it being having to dodge around the region's iconic flamethrowers, using wind currents to get a bit of a boost, dodging steam vents that can stun you and cause you to fall into the void, or pure good old-fashioned jumping puzzles. But despite how easily it could have been, the region isn't just a straight line. There's enough room for exploration and alternate paths, and progressing through the region is often about figuring out which path you're most comfortable with. There's an excess of shelters to make sure you're never having to redo too much, and the spawns are kept fairly minimal minimal to avoid having too much getting in the way of your platforming, but just enough that no two runs will be exactly the same either. It stands out in my mind because it was like the first truly difficult region I encountered in the Watcher. Before this, I'd been to almost nothing but tamer regions like Sunlit Port, Rusted Rex, Desolate Tract, and Torrid Desert. This was the first region that really kicked my butt, and it was also the first time I found Spinning Top out in the wild and got a sense for what the campaign was gonna be about. Tragically, they have moved that Spinning Top location to the other part of the region that, well, it hasn't shown up yet, so y'all know I'm not really complaining about that, but it does make me a little sad my own experience with the region has been relegated to purely a memory. Ah well. The only real knock against Heat Ducks is that because of how platforming focused it is, it turns into absolute hell on earth once it gets rotted because like, nope, now the spawns are too much and the goddamn clams can just pick you up and shove you straight into jets of fire and there's not all that much you can do about it. Yeah, this is why I'm not holding rotted variants against any region in the ranking, but I needed to complain about it somewhere, and this was the region that felt especially bad. But yeah, Heat Ducks is kind of just fire. One of the more unique Aether Ridge regions, both aesthetically and gameplay-wise, where the worst thing I can say about it, in its base state anyways, is that a few of the wind puzzles are a little janky, but that's a problem with wind puzzles in general, so still think the region is another delight to traverse regardless. Not quite as much as Thermal Relay though. Thermal Relay is my single favorite platforming gauntlet in all of Rainworld, period. I don't know, man, something about the subregion just really tickles me. How it's kind of a soft version of Five Pebbles and Looks to the Moon's electric hazards, how each and every room uses that mechanic in a new, interesting way with a slow escalation and challenge and danger the whole way through, how it really isn't even all that hard at the end of the day, it just looks a lot more dangerous than it is, but you still feel really damn cool for every challenge you complete. The crown jewel of the region, and probably my favorite room in all of the Watcher, is this big hub-like room in the middle of the region, which just, like, I love level design like this. I love how you keep popping back in and out of this room several times before finally crossing to the other side. And it comes paired with another one of my favorite music cues in the campaign, the unnerving pulse of Seaside that perfectly fits the area's vibe, even if its title doesn't, oops. It also just cracks me up how there's randomly just a normal platforming room over a pit that's quietly the scariest room in the region, but like, it comes right after the shelter, so if you do die there, what freaking ever, man. And I cannot get over this stupid little pipe maze, which is also just such a clever use of the shockers too. Maybe it's not the most fun room to traverse, but I'm too amused by it to care. This region is so funny. I struggled a bit with where exactly to place Thermal Relay because unlike every other region in the top 10, it do be a one and done type of experience. When you can't even go backwards through things, it's this one-way drop near the end, and it's not like particularly long either, but in the end, I settled for the bottom of S tier because S stands for subregion, peck you. I just love this dinky little place, the best of all 13 Aether Ridge regions if you ask me. Okay, we're up to the top 4, and every region remaining is wholly original to the Watcher, which feels a little unfair. Yeah, of course the regions handcrafted to be part of this specific campaign are gonna fare the best and put up against a bunch of modded regions made to be their own thing. That's really the folly of this whole ranking exercise, but there's not really anything I can do about that. What order will they be in though? Honestly, kind of changes based on my mood. I think they're all pretty much perfect regions, up there with the best of base game and Downpour, but for as much as I love its vibes, yeah, I can't let Outer Rim get any higher than this. I actually had this region a lot lower in my first drops of the list, near the bottom of the top 10, but I kind of just kept moving it up spot by spot till it had made it all the way up to the top 4, because there is simply no other region in the game that makes me feel this way. Like, so I always hear the bit about how Rainworld is a Dark Souls and Metroidvanias or whatnot. Ignore that Rainworld isn't a Metroidvania, but Outer Rim was the first time Rainworld felt like a Souls game. Like, oh my god, the atmosphere of this region is incredible. For one, there's just a sense of pervading loneliness in the entire region. It's so utterly barren, devoid of any signs of life, save for the occasional appearance of a roaming tribe of scavengers, which I kinda wish weren't there. I want this place to feel utterly desolate, hopeless, a monument to death itself. Nothing but the gray skies and the searing sandy winds to keep you company. Never before has any one region had so many different parts to it that just leave me utterly speechless. Like, whoa. The tall, imposing towers, the starcatchers just barely visible on the horizon, the large suspended pipes just before the throne. They went so hard on this region because they just knew that it had to be this big a spectacle, this large an area with this little life in it, to really emphasize just how far we are from where it all started, both in time and place. But of course, we can't talk about Outer Rim without talking about the long desert walk, which, Look, I get it, it's annoying, but not since Saints Ending have I felt emotions so strong as I did making that long trek for the first time, and I don't think anything since has matched them. Feelings of loneliness, of sadness, of sheer stubborn perseverance, not knowing if the sands would ever have an end, if it was all just like this, forever. Which I'm, again, overly attached to my own theory that Outer Rim is the far distant future of Outer Expanse, the once lush, vibrant jungles that were the Slug Cat's home, now reduced to naught but a wasteland. Nothing remains save for ruins and wrecks, dust, dirt and stone, rage, rot, and the rattling of bones. Man, I think the journey needs to be this long to really drive home that feeling, to make you just sit alone with your thoughts for a bit. Is it annoying to have to redo? I don't know, if you're boring, maybe. Again, barring the one aforementioned circumstance, you shouldn't ever be coming back to Outer Rim by accident, only by choice. You kinda know what you're getting into by that point, and I don't know, I just like doing the walk once in a while, basking in that atmosphere a little bit more. Oh, and there's the absolutely fricked platforming for sickos on the right side of Outer Rim. Honestly, having sat on it for a while, yeah, this section kinda is just a float skill check, huh? You can just barely do all of it without float. The only truly impossible part is just completely skippable, but like, should you? I don't know, but I kinda love that it's there, especially now that there's like an actual reward for doing it, an incredibly useful one at that. Another launch day pain point ironed out. They really did a lot to fix out this expansion, y'all. The only reason I'm keeping it below the top 3 is that like, you aren't really playing Rainworld here. You're either playing Urbex, Desert Bus, or Parkour Civilization depending on which part of the region you're in, but it's kind of hilarious to me that all 3 of these exist alongside each other like this, and so coherently too. Outer Rim is the region of the Watcher, the one that's clearly had the most love and thought put into it, the one that's, by a fair margin even, the absolute largest, the one that's just straight up the coolest, and it's almost certainly the region that's gonna stick with me the longest, even if it's not quite my favorite. But it wasn't the only region that had my beak on the floor the first time I played it. There's like layers to just how great Signal Spires is. For one, it's the fulfillment of a decade-long promise idea. The region is based on an older concept sketch for an iterator superstructure, this distinct pyramid shape with 2 towers sticking up out of it. And Signal Spires is basically just that. No region has ever felt more intently shaped to be one specific thing than this one. 2 spires with a handful of bridges between them. That's just really cool. And then, of course, the region itself absolutely rips. For one, it's the obligatory grapple worm region of the Watcher. Thank God, an obligation that's actually a good thing, and you're given one pretty much instantly no matter which spire you warp in from, so the devs are free to design the entire rest of the region around having one, which you can of course opt to ignore anyways if you really want a challenge, but grapple worms are fun and cute. Why would you ignore them? They'd be so sad. Architecturally, the region is essentially a hybrid of the leg and the wall, which given my general dislike for the exterior you'd think would be a bad thing, but nah, this is what they tried to do, but so much better by just, you know, being less excruciatingly linear and much more balanced from a difficulty perspective. Certainly not easy. I found my fair share of depths here between the various lizards and centipedes that have just as much mobility as you do, but nothing that feels as much like a wall as the worst exterior rooms. Plus it's just, you know, a lot prettier to look at. Pink for miles, pink as far as the eye can see. Maybe it's just bias, but I do not mind an overwhelming pinkness as much as I did Verdant and Waterway's greenness, though like, yeah, I guess a bit of color variety could have made the region even more striking, but the gorgeous diamond trees and the amazing skyline make up for whatever lack of visual diversity the region has to offer, so like, whatever, man. All of that would already land the region a high spot on this ranking, but there's, of course, what puts it way over the top. One of my absolute favorite moments of my Watcher playthrough, sending the whales, baby. I love how, on one hand, this is literally just the reindeer again, but on the other hand, it's, 1, so much easier to intuit, especially for longtime Rainworld players. 2, works so much more consistently. 3, is just way, way cooler. Like, look at this. What other game is like this? And it's all topped off by copying notes from Metropolis and just doing atop the tallest tower, but again, a long climb to meet spinning top that, again, just feels satisfying and makes you feel really cool. They could do one of these in every region and I'd never get tired of them. I pecking love climbing tall structures, baby. I genuinely cannot think of anything bad to say about Signal Spires other than, like, I guess the whales might be a little harder to figure out if you start on the right spire. Nothing's stopping you from grappling across the bottom bridge room though, so like, who cares? From a pure gameplay perspective, it's the best region in the Watcher, easily. I just love the last 2 left a tiny bit more. So, here we are again, the top 2. And just like last time, it's a battle between the all-around best region and the one I have the most bias towards. This time though, the bias lost. For starters, it's really funny to me that the tallest region in the Watcher placed right below the flattest one. Though, when I first drafted this list, Desolate Tract was at the very top, my absolute favorite region in the Watcher, and it's only on replay that another one of my favorites just barely edged it out. Doesn't mean I don't think this region isn't excellent, of course. And it comes down to the simple fact that no other region in the game had me on edge like this one did the first time I came here. Not Five Pebbles, not the Rot, not any of the Rotted regions, or even Outer Rim. No, this place is scarier than any of them, by a lot. There's just something uncanny about Desolate Tract. A sense of pervading wrongness. A feeling that you should not be here. No other region's architecture has ever felt more intentional in its design. Like a finely crafted mega machine that you're crawling through the guts of, seeing what looks like the same rooms over and over again, making you feel like you're not making any progress, like you're going insane. It is the backrooms of Rain World, pale gray in every direction and no exit in sight. And you may be thinking, Crow, that's like exactly how you described Ridgeworks, and you hated that region. Well, yeah, I think Ridgeworks did that on accident, and it was also, like, annoying, actually maze-like and hellish. Desolate Tract keeps things simple, keeps itself fairly linear, because it knows the effect is more potent if there's no nuisances getting in the way of the feeling it's trying to evoke. That discomfort, that fear that it makes me feel, that's completely by design. It's also just a lot more visually striking. Brutal in its construction, windswept and forlorn, and utterly devoid of color, save for the lizards that prowl its halls. The harsh buzz of Cyprad echoing through the tracks certainly doesn't help. It feels as lonely as Outer Rim, despite having a somewhat flourishing ecosystem, somehow. Though, on the subject of music, I feel like this is one of those regions that would have been better off without a threat theme, you know? Feels a bit out of place to have one here. Sometimes nothing is scarier. Oh, and to be clear, up to this point, I have only been talking about the right half of Desolate Tract. You know, the easier, less spooky half. Can you imagine my shock coming back to this region later and seeing them for the first time? By far the freakiest new addition to the expansion. I had accidentally made a lizard friend my first time here, and they were still following me the first time I saw the loaches, and while I made it to cover just fine, they ate my lizard friend. Never have I been more aghast and upset at nature being nature. Which, yeah, they do also just make the gameplay of this half of the region a lot more interesting. A choice between crawling through the even tighter tunnels below the surface or chancing a run up top and just hoping there isn't a prowling monstrosity headed your way. And the architecture of the rooms on this half is a bit more diverse, a bit more platformy to boot. I love that you can also climb up to the top of the big tract rooms and crawl through the ceiling. Doing so is the only way back up the tall shaft you fell down in the first place. Sure, it's far from the most challenging region, it's another one that looks a lot scarier than it really is, but it's got just enough gameplay spice to stay interesting, and it's completely unmatched in terms of sheer vibes, one that immediately stood out even amidst a crowded field. It's the region you sure as hell aren't gonna forget, even if you kinda wish you could. And like last time, I'm gonna take a moment to go through just the regions as a whole, from worst to best, leading up to the big reveal of the region you already know is topping the list. Sans the Rotted regions, because who really cares? They'd all be at the bottom. Anyways, number 26, Aether Ridge. The sheer size and its oppressive negative aura outweigh anything good about it. Number 25, The Surface. Wasted potential mostly, and weirdly unremarkable besides. Number 24, Torrid Desert. Pretty much repeat what I said about The Surface, it's just a bit less annoying. Number 23, Torrential Railways, and again, but I like the vibes here a lot more. Number 22, Verdant Waterways. Green is an uncreative color, I'm told, but I think this one's alright. Number 21, Cold Storage. Carried up this high entirely by Station Annex, and because I like purple more than green. Number 20, Unfortunate Evolution. Wonderful event region, but I like playing Rain World too much to rank it much higher than this. Number 19, Damon. Ditto, just with a bit more reason to return to it than Unfortunate Evolution. Number 18, Shattered Terrace. Wonderful vibes, but a bit too committed to its functions to stand out. Number 17, Sunbaked Alley. Hell of a glow up to still end up feeling like the middest region in the campaign somehow. Number 16, Fetid Glen. Utterly beautiful to look at, a bit too obnoxious to actually play through. Number 15, Shrouded Stacks. Shame the moths weren't able to carry a single region into the top half. Number 14, Migration Path. Crap fact, I wish there was just a bit more to this place. Number 13, Fractured Gateways. Same with this one, but I just think it's so clever, so neat. Number 12, Stormy Coast, the region I want to live in the most. Number 11, Ancient Urban, the region the most people live in. Number 10, Turbulent Pump. Crow's water bias strikes again, baby. Number 9, Coral Caves. Icon, legend, cool as heck to play too. Number 8, Pillar Grove. Oh yeah, I guess there are a lot of pillars in this grove, huh? Number 7, Badlands. More like, good lands. Yeah, this video is really long, I'm running out of jokes, sorry. Number 6, Salination. Cry me a river, baby, so I can swim in it. Number 5, Heat Ducts. It is, in fact, lit. Number 4, Outer Rim. I've never actually played a Souls game, by the way. Number 3, Signal Spires. Haha, she loves pink because she's a girl. Wrong, I'm a moth. Number 2, Desolate Tract. Gah. And of course, outshining them all to rank as my absolute favorite region in the Watcher, said a few times that it was a pretty close race to the top, but honestly, I was lying the whole time. It wasn't close. Rusted Rex stands head and shoulders above every other region in the Watcher, by a lot. SS tier, alongside the number 1 from the original region ranking, the only 2 I'd hold in such high regard. And while I don't have as much of a personal connection to the Rusted Rex, I do think it is just the best region in the entire game. I'm kind of just in awe at how well this region is designed. It's one of the largest regions in the campaign, but it's also got no less than 5 distinct sub-areas, each of which has their own little ecosystem, and at no point does any of it feel incohesive, nor is there ever only one single path forwards. Save for, this one room here, I guess. Okay. But, like, you've got the kind of store-like region right outside the Sunbaked Alley portal where frogs frolic freely and red leeches swarm the waters. You've got the more vertical, platforming-heavy top right area where melons hang between ledges and centipedes rule the lands. And to the left, there's the sandy beaches patrolled by drill crabs and blue lizards, and past that, the shoreline-esque harbor area with blue leeches and jellies crowding up the sea in equal measure. And at the very left, the tall tower-like structure that's got a whole maze of rooms inside it, where a cavalcade of lizards, especially those of the white and peach variety, are always on the hunt. Is there any Rainworld region more ecologically or architecturally diverse than Rusted Rex, much less both? It's got just a little bit of everything without having too much of anything, so the region constantly stays fresh, never wears out its welcome no matter how long you spend in it, because every few minutes you're met with a different kind of challenge, having a different type of experience, seeing something new. And sure, they say a jack of all trades is a master of none, but like, if you're this good at everything you do, who the hell needs mastery? And it's, of course, gorgeous to look at. It's easy to compare it to Shoreline, but the region it actually reminds me of the most is one of my favorite modded regions, the Far Shore, which I wouldn't be surprised if the Rusted Rex developers took notes from that one, because they share a lot in common, which I'm not complaining about. I wish the Far Shore got the canonization treatment too, but this is more than a worthy consolation prize. Rusted Rex also has several of my favorite music cues in the expansion. One of the more instantly memorable threat themes for one. Evening at Peace is like some wonderful hybrid of the coast and pictures of the past. Drill Crab is a bouncy, vibey little tune that feels fitting for where its namesake roam, and Evil Arp is, the first time this one started playing, I thought I'd accidentally done something wrong when a bomb was about to go off or something. I have no clue why the song's like that, but it's really funny to me. It almost feels like a bit of a crime to say that the best Watcher region is the one that looks the most like a base game region, but it does that Pillar Grove thing where it's got the vibes of the base game but the design philosophy of the Watcher's regions. It makes it feel both familiar and yet kind of foreign and uncanny at the same time. It's a different kind of surreal than the Watcher's more extravagant regions, but it doesn't feel out of place amongst them either, and it's a region that just feels so comfortable to exist in. If Stormy Coast is where I want to live, Rusted Rex is where I'd set up my vacation home. When I was recording footage for this video, I gathered so much extra footage of this region in particular, way more than I'd ever need, because I just wanted to keep existing in it for as long as possible. I love it so much. It's a region where nearly everything good I've said about every other region on this list also applies to it, because it's just got so much to offer on every possible front, where the only single possible criticism I can think of is that it really should have had a 4th portal, in this room specifically. So yeah, the worst part of the region is that there aren't enough ways to get to it. Rusted Rex, my pick for the best region in the Watcher. But that's just my opinion, and these regions are so diverse and so consistently strong that I could easily see most any of them being someone's favorite, so I'd be delighted to hear y'all's opinions in the comments below. Just keep it civil, alright? No clue if more Rainworld content is on the horizon for my channel, nor if we're ever gonna get any more expansions in the future, cause like, at some point the well's gonna run dry, you know? But despite its flaws, I still think the Watcher is a more than worthy expansion slash sequel to Rainworld, and its regions are a huge part of why, so I'm glad I finally got to say my piece on all of them. Wherever the winds take us, I've been Crow the Moth, and I hope you all have a wonderful cycle.